So have you tried to pull the challenges out of quarantine? So have you tried to pull the positives out of quarantine? In this video, I'm going to attempt to break down some of the positives that I've been able to get. Welcome to my channel, This Life Reconsidered. My name is Jenina, type A persona, ambitious, and a stroke survivor, committed to being a student of optimism and what you're hopefully going to be getting through this channel. I figured it'd be an interesting challenge to try to make light of some of the positives. And this isn't to like glorify it, but this is at least to kind of figure out what I'm going to learn from that. Because if I've got to go through something like quarantine, then I am going to somehow maximize it. At least that's the perspective that I'm trying to add to it. You see the theme that I'm trying to go with here for the channel. That all said, number one should be obvious and apparent. And for me, this has been eye-opening and enlightening. I am much more intentional with money and minimalism. The reality is that, living is expensive. You go out, you run errands, you shop, you go out to dinner, you go to drinks, frivolous spending, and you realize how much money is coming out and you're pushing yourself and you're worried about finances. Now, all that said, in a pandemic, when people aren't spending or they're being much more intentional with spending, and then now when you're talking about the reality that people are losing pays and things like that, like these are all really, really tough times. So you don't exactly feel inclined to go with crazy spending trends, right? Like spending sprees. Like that just doesn't seem all that logical, right? So you find yourself being much more intentional about what you're really spending, why, and do you need it? And the more deliberate you are with the money, the more that you find yourself kind of in a perspective in which you're just kind of making smarter choices. I have found that I am less inclined to go on frivolous shopping, and only really if it's mission critical do I end up purchasing it. And that has been huge. When you think about things like minimalism, how often do you need to go on as many shopping sprees, or do you really need those pairs of shoes, especially if you're walking around the house most of the day? So money suddenly is much more intentional and not just frivolous. The next benefit of quarantine, and this is going to sound a little cold-blooded, but it's true. I find a relief in not needing to be fake. And I say that because when you are out in the world and you're outdoors and you're interacting with people, you have to spend a lot of time being super polite, super over the top, and all the other stuff. And obviously when you need to do that, you pull that out, and that should happen, right? Because we have manners. That all said, like there is some type of relief in realizing that I do not always need to be on. Because being on takes a lot of energy. And sometimes, you just don't want the stress of making sure that everyone sees how happy or how comfortable and how relax and how great you are, especially if you're not feeling great in something like the kind of universe that we're living in right now. Quarantine has been a relief for not needing to be plugged up in tight spaces and not needing to overwhelm myself. As I get into this stage in my life where I feel like I kind of am okay being a little bit more of a hermit, so I don't feel like I'm surrounded around people, and I can appreciate that. And that's one thing I've honestly have been able to appreciate in quarantine. It is almost like a thrill when I go out and I walk my dog and I find that the streets are almost deserted, or there's not as many people out, I don't feel as overwhelmed. And I get to appreciate my surroundings a little more because I'm not feeling as salty. This next one, I honestly believe is probably one of the best benefits in quarantine. And it's because you have every reason to make sure that you are catching up with as many people as possible. I find that when you're living life and everything is crazy and busy for you and the world is kind of overwhelming, you realize it's months before you've talked with that friend that you really love spending time with, or before you called your cousin, before you kind of had a good laugh with your college roommates. Like, these are all things that keep us human. And when we get to have those human connections and those touch points, they make us feel like, like the world around us isn't quite so bad. And now that we can't see those people, you now have to make a concerted effort to connect. Yes, we're not sitting in the same room and face to face, but now I know they're not going somewhere, and maybe we can have that video chat and do a glass of wine. My college roommates live all over the country, and I have connected with them so frequently during quarantine because it's been amazing that no matter where we're living, West Coast, East Coast, Southeast, like, we are able to now hop online wherever we're with our families and now kind of connect and share. And we've had virtual game nights, and those kinds of things are so irreplaceable, and you don't have an excuse. Like, it's one thing when you don't have the excuse to see them because you're not close, but now, thanks to the advent of technology and video, you now can kind of close the gap and make room to connect. And then it doesn't feel like it's been eons before you've seen someone, because I don't know when I'm going to be able to get on a plane, but I do know that it doesn't cost me very much to hop on a video call and connect with my friends. Here's another one. Passion chasing. Quarantine has been really, really, really good for me personally, because I have found reasons to carve out time to chase my passions. When I was spending a lot of time outside of the home and always blaming my busy schedule for not having the time to do the things that made me happy, I just was like, whatever. No big deal, because I don't have time to do it. But when you have time in your home, you have to fill that time with other things. And for me, it's been pursuing my passions. I've gotten through more books, starting YouTube channel, spending more time with my podcast, things that I never had time for because I was either too tired or always out of the home. And I love the fact that now I get to really spend time digging into the things that I love to do, or the things that I said I just didn't have time to start because there was always something else going on. And quarantine's been really good to allow me to focus and try my hand at different things. It doesn't, it's not, obviously these times are limited, and we're eventually going to go back to the world as we know it. But when are you going to get this abundance of time? And I've been trying to maximize it to the drop until the world just starts spinning again, which it inevitably will happen. And it's starting to happen depending on where you live. Here's another benefit that I've found in quarantine, to be honest. And it is, I have a completely different appreciation for my schedule. When you're working from home, it is so easy to just get up, roll up to your coffee table or your office or wherever you work, and open your laptop and just start answering emails or whatever it is you do. It's so easy to just kind of throw yourself into work from the second that you get up. And now I feel like so I don't like lose the benefit of being from home. I am very intentional about when I get up and have lunch, or when I go out for a walk, or when I spend time with the dog, or when I spend time with my husband. Those little things that you don't realize are precious things that you can't really get back. And now, because you're home, you have more time to enjoy that. So you should be maximizing the benefit of creating a schedule that allows you not only to work, but also to make sure that you are kind of taking time for those little things that keep you a little settled and give you peace. I will admit, I think the first couple of weeks I was working from home, I would get up and I was easily pulling 16, 18-hour days, just cranking things out. And it was taking a whole lot out of me. And I was home. But then I felt like I wasn't giving myself the benefit of realizing I had more ownership of my schedule and that I should be claiming that time. So I felt energized. It was so frustrating to think about the fact that I'm home and should feel like I'm at home, but also that I'm creating moments in my day so I'm not as overwhelmed. Here's something else that I am going to thank quarantine for, and it's giving me a completely different outlook on what it means to protect and manage your schedule. Working from home can be a benefit, or it can be a hindrance if you really treat it as though you're still at the office. The benefit of being at home is that you can take pockets of time and carve out that personal time. So when I have lunch, I can have lunch and read the news, or I can have that cup of coffee, and I should have that because now my home space has become my workspace. So now I don't have any division of those two different environments, and that's not really all that healthy. And I've always been a big proponent of making sure that my work environment stays work and home is home. But in this world, we now have to, we're all living in one singular environment every day. So now I find that when it is lunchtime, I get up and I breathe, I walk around, I consume the air, or I process the news a little bit, or when it's the day is over, I make sure that I sit down on the couch with my dog and my husband because I have earned it, because I put in that time. And that is really, really, really critical, because you need to give yourself that opportunity to reset, because you need to go back and throw yourself into it every day. And as long as we're in this state, we're going to have to learn how to work in this new home environment. And home should still also be home. So now treat your schedule as separation. Give yourself that separation. So you come back to work and you feel a little bit more energized. Another thing I'm going to say that I've appreciated in quarantine is removing headaches. I feel like with the kind of world that we're living in right now, and there's a lot of things kind of happening and going on, I now find that in quarantine, I am almost forced to focus and give myself the breathing space to process the information that I can. And I really, really am appreciative for that, because, I think that when you have no choice but to slow down, or you can't move as quickly, or you're not caught up in the rat race, you are much more likely to focus on the things that matter to you and the passions that you have. Like, I think it is so much easier for me to focus now because of quarantine, because I'm not surrounded by as much madness and processing as much information and as much activity happening around me. And I also get selective about what I let in my airspace when I'm home and when I'm not, like, plugged into everything. And getting to zone in on a few things is such a huge benefit. And it's actually makes me feel like the air is a little clearer, and I love that. So I'm going to admit that it may seem a little funky that I chose to focus on the positives within something as crazy as quarantine. But I'll be honest, I have been feeling so mentally fried and emotionally fried that if I didn't try to make light of the benefits of quarantine, then I was only just going to feel much more resentful and angered, and I didn't want that to be my benefit and my takeaway, because the reality is that quarantine is a reality. So if I've got to live through it, what's the objective here is I'm going to try to make the best of it so I don't feel like it's time wasted. And I would hate to think that I had all of this time to try to explore things or to breathe and to connect to people, to connect with people, and I didn't do that. That just feels like wasted time. And for me, after everything that's happened and I think about the stroke, wasted time just doesn't really feel like an option. Have you tried to find the positive in quarantine? Leave me some notes in the comments section. I would love to kind of get your perspective and maybe on other things I didn't even get to touch on. Thank you.